I always thought that ghosts were a figment of our imagination, something that existed only in stories and movies. That was until I moved into my new apartment. At first, everything seemed normal. But after a few weeks, strange things started happening. I would hear footsteps in the hallway outside my door, but when I went to check, no one was there. Objects would move on their own, and doors would slam shut when there was no wind. One night, as I was getting ready for bed, I saw a figure standing in the corner of my room. It was transparent and seemed to be made of mist. I couldn't believe my eyes. I froze, unable to move or even scream. The figure began to move towards me, and I felt a cold breeze on my face. I could feel its presence getting stronger, and my heart was racing. I didn't know what to do. Suddenly, the figure disappeared and everything went quiet. I was left alone in the dark, trembling with fear. I didn't sleep at all that night, and I spent the rest of the week trying to convince myself that it was just my imagination. But the following night, the figure returned. It was closer this time, and I could see that it was a woman. She seemed to be reaching out to me, and I could feel her cold breath on my face. I was too scared to move or scream, and I just lay there frozen in terror. After that night, the figure appeared every night. She would come closer and closer until I could almost touch her. I tried to ignore her, but I couldn't. I was terrified, and I knew I had to do something. I spoke to my landlord, and he told me that the apartment building was built on an old cemetery. He said that many people had reported seeing ghosts in the building, and that some had even moved out because they couldn't handle the paranormal activity. I knew I had to get out of there. I packed my bags and left the apartment that night. As I was leaving, I saw the figure in the hallway. She was smiling, and I could feel her presence even as I walked out of the building. I will never forget my experience in that apartment. It taught me that ghosts are real, and that sometimes there's no escaping the horrors of the supernatural.
I live in Vermont, pretty close to the Canadian border, and my family owns a good chunk of a mountain behind our house. I've always loved hiking up our mountain and camping out. But after several instances of being far too close for comfort with coyotes and bears at night, I decided to build a small shack for camping in. I built it in my freshman year of high school, and it certainly was nothing to write home about. It was basically a log cabin made from only moose maple, which sick for building with and completely encased in roofing to prevent rain from blowing through the cracks between logs. The camp became a pretty popular spot for my friends, and I to hang out, shoot guns, and blow stuff up because it was 10 miles away from any significant settlement. While it was certainly liberating being in the middle of nowhere, we all knew it was on us to get to safety, as any of us got injured up there. Anyways, I'll start with the story. I asked one of my close friends to go on a camp out on a Friday night after school. We'd been friends since middle school, so he had been up there multiple times before. After hiking up and roasting some hot dogs on a fire while listening to some chill music, it was dark. Whenever it gets dark on these campouts, you can always hear wildlife, I thought, running around the woods surrounding the fire. I always thought it was creepy, but after a long time with no bad encounters with wildlife, I felt pretty okay with the situation every night I was up there, and it more or less just became a neat occurrence while camping out. I always was armed with some sort of gun going up there for protection, so I never felt that scared. Anyways, after having our fill, we decided to go into the camp and get some sleep. In the camp, 10x12, there was one homemade bunk bed, some floor space and countertop, and a small wood cook stove. I took top bunk and my friend took the bottom. We both fell asleep pretty quickly, but awoke simultaneously at what I would guess was around 1 a.m. to the sound of a church choir right outside the camp. It sounded like 30, 40 people singing, and it was resonating inside my head. I could distinctly make out some Latin words, but I could never piece together what was being said. I turned down to my friend and asked if his phone was on, and he said it was dead. The creepiest part about this after reflecting on it was that we were perfectly calm. If anything, it was super soothing, and eventually, we both fell asleep. In the morning, we both checked around the camp and saw no signs of anyone, let alone 40 people. We were 10 miles away from a town. To this day, I have no clue what happened. but I commonly refer to the singing as the angels because of how angelic it sounded. I think about it all the time, but it hasn't happened to me again since. I'm just glad I have someone to corroborate the story with, or else people would think I'm insane. I had a friend when I was around 8 that I would always hang out with. She drove me up the wall because if we were in different rooms and I called out to her, she'd never answer. She would just walk into the room and then respond. I hated it because it would scare me when she'd silently pop up out of nowhere when I called out. Her whole family was like this too. I thought it was just a politeness thing because one of my aunts would always yell at me for shouting "what" if she called me from another room. But my aunt was only angry that I never said yes. So, yeah, I thought my friend and her family were just weird. I asked my friend why she could never just simply answer me when I yelled for her. She'd always just shrug and say there's no real reason, and that's just how she rolls. I pointed out that her parents and siblings were the same, and she said they roll like that too. Okay, fine. Well, one day I was over there and her dad was at work, and her stay-at-home mom went to take one of her brothers to hockey practice, and the younger one to the doctor's office or something. She left us home because she didn't feel like carting around a bunch of kids, and she knew we wouldn't tear the house apart like the boys would. An hour after she left, my friend and I were upstairs together doing craft shit when I heard someone downstairs call her name. It happened twice, and she didn't notice. I told her what I heard, and we listened. After a while, we heard the voice faintly call to her. It sounded like it was coming from the garage. I was like, "Oh, your mom is back. Ask her what she wants." My friend just quietly got up and walked all the way downstairs instead of yelling back. I followed her, but was pissed. Like, why are we walking all this way when simply yelling back would get us all the answers we need? We go in the garage and there's no one there. We check the entire first floor and nothing. Doors and windows were all closed and locked still. I'm a bit weirded out and my friend nonchalantly grabs some ice cream from the fridge, and we go and sit outside on the doorstep to eat it. I ask her, "What was that about?" And she's like, "Yeah. So you asked me why we don't answer anyone calling from other rooms or outside, and this is why." She explained that in her culture, they believe that demons use the voices of your loved ones to try to lure you to hell or something. She said you're safe if you don't answer them, which is why her family would always come into the room to verify the person calling them was actually a person. Now I'm freaked out and don't want to go back inside at all until her mom would return. My friend was pretty unaffected by it all and said she's used to it. In my panic, I asked if the demons ever shifted so that even if you see your loved one who called you, it really wasn't them. She got quiet and thought about that, then got scared and started crying. She said she never thought of that before. We both ran to our other friend's house down the road and stayed there. We ended up at our other friend's house and promptly scared the shit out of her and her siblings with our story. Her poor mom had a house of like 6 crying children and did her best to calm us all down. She told us it wasn't real and that it was the wind or whatever. My spooky friend's mom eventually showed up when she got home and couldn't find us. All us kids were in the yard and our friend's mom was explaining what happened to her and said that we probably watched too many scary movies and imagined the voice. Spooky friend's mom whipped around to us and in a panicked tone yelled, "Oh no, you answer." You can probably imagine that ruined any progress the other mom made in alleviating our fears.